and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video I would like to talk about aespa's storyline, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the plot, the universe where all of this is set, and its possible connections to the SM culture universe. Now, even if aespa only debuted a few months ago, their narrative universe has already quite a lot to unpack. We have the aespa avatars that are credited as actual members of the group, a mysterious entity called Black Mamba, and a lot of new terminology that is associated to the unfolding storyline and aespa's music as well. Today we're gonna break down all of it in order to clarify any confusion about the storyline and concept, so without wasting any time, let's dive right in and see what's going on. Now, aespa's storyline is set in a more technologically advanced version of the world where entities called eyes took physical form and accessed our reality through a number of sinkholes that opened up across the world. Like it was confirmed in Next Level, these sinkholes are called POS, which is an acronym that means Port of Soul. These are portals that connect the digital world to our own, and as we saw in the first episode of the SM culture universe, the portals were actually opened by an entity called Navis, which is a character that was officially introduced back in the IRENE video that anticipated aespa's debut. Now, the name Navis seems to have been inspired by the Latin word navis, which is a female noun that can mean either ship or constellation. In the story, Navis is an AI system that is able to open doors between different dimensions, and as it was confirmed by IRENE, Navis is also the one who told the avatars about the existence of their original counterparts. Because of that, the avatars are shown to be extremely loyal to this system, but even if Navis is the one that connected the two realities together, it's also important to point out that Navis did not create the avatars, because the eyes are creatures that we created ourselves without even realizing it. You see, in the story, the eyes are very complex entities. According to what we saw in episode 1, the avatars are a combination of all the information that we upload on social media, and because of that, they are creatures that can be considered as a perfected version of ourselves that embody the best aspects of an individual. Even if they can be seen as a copy of the original, however, episode 1 also tells us that their existence actually transcends both the real and the digital world. As the professor tells us, the eyes can be seen as alter egos with a personality built from the information that we upload, but once they are created, they also seem to develop a consciousness of their own, and this idea is also reinforced by the name itself. You see, in Korean, the word "I" actually means child, so to a certain extent we can say that the avatars are children that we created online that are both copies of the original but also entities that exist independently. As we saw back in IRENE, the avatars learn from their original. Much like children, the eyes imitate them, they copy them, and the more time they spend with real people, the more the avatars learn to act like humans. Now, in episode 1, it is hinted that whoever has an online presence also has an avatar that was generated from it, but while some people choose to ignore their avatars, others interact with them to the point that they create meaningful relationships out of this connection. When this happens, this process is called sync, which is the act of connecting the avatars to the humans. As we see in the videos, aespa and the avatars are synced together, and because of that, the avatar has the ability to access information that only the original actually knows. This means that when a person syncs with their avatar, their connection is not just digital but also psychological, and when this event takes place, this avatar becomes a person's mai, which is a word that means the most precious friend, and that also happens to be the name of aespa's fandom. Now, in the story, people and avatars can sync in different ways. As Ning Ning told us in Black Mamba, for instance, the avatars live in the flat, which is the digital world they come from, and they created them with the information that we uploaded in it. When the eyes are in the flat, aespa can communicate with them using technology, so they use social media to sync with them and exchange information like they would with a normal friend. When the avatars cross over using the Port of Soul, however, the time that they spend together with their human is actually called recall, and this is a process that allows them to learn from the originals, but also to gather more information about the real world. If in IRENE we saw Karina literally teaching the avatar how to move and act like a person, in episode 1 we also saw Giselle attending the lecture with Giselle herself, meaning that once they cross over, the avatars can learn both from the originals as well as from the environment itself. Now, on a general level, we can say that in the story, the eyes are perceived as benevolent entities. As we see society slowly adjusting to their presence, the avatars are perceived as another version of ourselves, but this perspective is not shared by everyone, because there are also people that find this definition unsettling, and rightfully so. In episode 1, for instance, this opinion is actually voiced by a student attending the lecture. When the professor defines the avatars as another version of ourselves, the boy disagrees because the information that we upload on the internet are not always correct. When we use social media, we can lie, we can use Photoshop, and we only show the best part of ourselves by leaving out our flaws. As the boy points out, even if the eyes are born from the information that we share, what we share can be faked, so the eyes are not like us, but rather the embodiment of what we present to the world. Now, to this very fair point, the professor actually replies with a quote that might actually summarize what aespa's storyline is all about. In the video, the professor mentions the phrase "existence precedes essence," and this is a quote by Jean-Paul Sartre that represents the main claim of existentialism. Now, on a very general level, this sentence refers to the idea that our choices are more important than our nature. You see, in the past, the traditional philosophical view tended to identify our essence as something more permanent than its existence, meaning that in the process of defining a person's identity, our nature was believed to be more important than how we act. According to existentialism, however, people can use their consciousness to create their own set of values and decide their purpose, and since people live by these rules, our choices define our identity more than nature ever could. Now, in aespa's concept, this idea is used by comparing the act of choice to the way we portray ourselves on social media. Even if our online presence might be different from our real selves, our choice to change is seen as something that actually reveals who we desire to become. So if for the student the eyes are a fake imitation, for the professor the eyes actually reveal the truth about ourselves. You see, in the story, the avatars represent our desire to evolve. They embody the best part of a person, and because of that, they represent an ideal of goodness and beauty that up to this point humans can only imitate. Following this logic, the boundary between what's real and what's fake becomes very blurry, because if the avatars are perceived as our potential true selves, this means they can be considered as a new type of evolution that is actually based on choice and not on nature. Now, this idea is also reinforced by aespa's music, because if in Black Mamba Winter told us that this is evolution, in Next Level Giselle defined this process as new evo, which is a word that literally implies that a new evolution is taking place. By the looks of it, it seems that the eyes are portrayed as the next level of human evolution, but as Giselle foreshadows, this process might also be dangerous, because if the eyes are digital entities, they can also be hacked. Sure enough, this is exactly what happens in the story, because as Giselle points this out, this danger becomes a reality with the sudden attack of the Black Mamba, which is a malevolent entity that hacks the system and causes the eyes and the humans to disconnect. Now, in real life, the Black Mamba is one of the most venomous snakes in the world, but this name also refers to a computer virus that encrypts the data and threatens to release them to the public unless a ransom is paid. Much like what the name implies, this virus is just as dangerous for a machine as the snake is for an individual, and in the story, the Black Mamba is an entity that mixes these two concepts in a single creature that infects the eyes with their venom. As we saw in both the debut and episode 1, however, the venom of the Black Mamba causes a lot more than disconnection, because when the eyes are taken over, the avatars change and actually turn evil. On top of that, it also seems that when an avatar is infected, the human associated to it might get infected as well, but even if we still don't know to what extent this event might take place, the lyrics of Black Mamba foreshadow that the end goal of this virus is actually to swallow everything. Now, when it comes to the timeline, I think that episode 1 shows us the general course of the events, while Black Mamba and Next Level kinda overlap with one another. You see, in the story, when the Black Mamba disconnects the system, Navis sends the eyes to the Kwangya, which is the place of origin of the Black Mamba. Now, in the story, the Kwangya is defined as the unprescribed infinite digital world beyond the flat with no rule of form. This is a word that comes from the Korean Kwangya that means wilderness, so the Kwangya here is literally the wild digital world that exists beyond the internet and that is not controlled by any law. What's interesting about the Kwangya is that this is the location that connects aespa to other groups of the SM multiverse, because if Kwangya was also mentioned by NCTU in 90s Love, this place might have also been shown in Kai's solo debut as well as IRENE and SEULGI's Naughty. If we take a look at their concept, for instance, Kai's song centers around him being taken over by a dangerous passion, while IRENE and SEULGI's concept is all about duality. On top of that, in Uncover, SEULGI dances in front of mirrors that show us digital reflections that are not fully complete, and in their master stage, the Black Mamba appears associated to a portal to another dimension. This might imply that in the multiverse, SEULGI and IRENE might be involved with the Black Mamba, but when it comes to aespa's storyline, I think that we need to pay attention to Navis, because that thing is actually very sketchy. You see, according to what we saw until now, Navis is an entity that is alien to our world. It's an AI that was not created by humans and that is responsible for opening the door between reality and the digital world. Up until now, Navis is portrayed as a positive entity because she's the one that connected the avatars to the humans and she's the one to send the eyes to fight the Black Mamba in the Kwangya, but as we see in both Black Mamba and Next Level, this is the very journey that leads the avatars to get infected, meaning that Navis might actually be already compromised. Now, as I mentioned before, the virus makes the avatars turn evil, and this switch is actually very evident in the lyrics. In Black Mamba, for instance, the song begins with aespa talking about their positive experience with my aespa. At this point, we know that it's the girls talking, because Ning Ning says that they are at the center of the world, and the other version is in the flat, where the growing power at the girls' every action. Even if this unity shows aespa a new dimension, however, when the connection is lost, things start to change, because when the avatars wander in the Kwangya, the temptation poisons them and they become consumed by greed. Now in the video, this process is obviously portrayed with Karina being taken over by the Black Mamba, but before that, we also see a snake creeping in on Winter while she is in the Kwangya. This event also overlaps with a sudden change of perspective, because right after we see the snake, the avatars take the mic and Winter tells us that they are the aespa and there can be two. As we see in the video, the Winter that sings these lines is the one in the phone. It is the digital one who has been infected by the Black Mamba and explains their intention of turning on the humans in order to become the only aespa. So considering this information, we can say that the infection of the Black Mamba is eventually meant to spread in reality and take over the world. Now this idea is also reinforced in Next Level, because in that video we see a very similar change taking place. As I mentioned earlier, the events that we see in the comeback actually overlap with the events that took place in Black Mamba, because if in Black Mamba we saw aespa talking about the avatars going to Kwangya, Next Level shows us their adventure in this location as well as their journey to reach Cosmo, which is yet another word mentioned in 90s Love that supposedly represents the next level of their quest. Even if at first the avatars are very confident in their unity, however, soon enough the Black Mamba starts tempting them and their connection with aespa breaks. This leads to darkness taking over, and even if the avatars want to fight the greed and want to defeat the Black Mamba, in the lyrics they eventually say that Kwangya is the real world and they leave for Cosmo feeling like a beast. This implies that much like what we saw in Black Mamba in episode 1, the venom of the virus managed to infect them and now they're moving on as distorted version of what they once were. As we saw at the end of Black Mamba, the virus won the battle for now. She crossed over to the real world by taking the form of a woman that looks suspiciously similar to Navis, but this is just the beginning of the story, because in order to save the world and themselves, aespa will have to fight the Black Mamba and reunite with their mice. To know how this will play out, however, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!